Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into a fascinating, surprisingly high-stakes world that most of us literally never see, yet it impacts almost everything we buy. I'm talking about the totally invisible rules of global maritime measurement. Specifically, we're going to look at the International Convention on Tonnage Measurement of Ships, adopted way back in 1969. It's this massive global system just hiding in plain sight, regulating the actual arteries of international commerce. So let's unpack this whole shebang and jump right in.
So how do you actually measure a merchant ship? I mean, it sounds like a pretty straightforward question, right? But when we're dealing with these floating ocean behemoths that literally transport the global economy, well, it's not just about whipping out a tape measure for length or displacement. It is all about volume, internal capacity, and ultimately, money. For a super long time, figuring out how to precisely and fairly calculate the internal size of these massive vessels was frankly incredibly complicated. You couldn't just guess. We're talking billions of dollars in global logistics hinging on getting these measurements exactly right and doing it in a way that absolutely everyone agreed upon.
The real problem here is that before the 1969 convention, the maritime industry was facing a massive measurement crisis. I mean, it was essentially the Wild West of maritime logistics out there. There was absolutely no single, unified way to calculate the tonnage of merchant ships. Instead, you had all these different conflicting systems being used simultaneously by different countries, different ports, all around the world. Imagine trying to run a totally interconnected global industry where nobody even agrees on the basic units of measurement. A ship might pay a tiny nominal fee in one country, sail across the strait, and suddenly get slammed with an exorbitant charge simply because the destination port calculated volume differently. It was chaotic, disjointed, and just a complete logistical nightmare for international trade.
To understand how we actually fixed this mess, we have to look at how the problem built up over time. Our story actually kicks off way back in 1854. All those confusing, overlapping systems that were causing so much trouble in the 20th century, they originally traced their roots back to a single method devised by a guy named George Mosam from the British Board of Trade. But, over the next 100 years or so, different nations tweaked, modified, and totally mutated his 1854 method. By the time the International Maritime Organization finally stepped in to adopt a new convention in 1969, the global system was just completely fractured. And as we're going to see, simply adopting that convention was really just the starting line of a very long road to getting it fully enforced by 1982 and then finally hitting universal compliance in 1994.
The historical text of the convention noted, and I quote, "considerable differences between them, and it was recognized that there was a great need for one single international system." Okay, that is quite the diplomatic understatement, isn't it? Considerable differences meant that a ship owner essentially had to maintain a whole library of different tonnage certificates just to sail a standard everyday route. A vessel assessed at one size in a European port could be classified as a completely different size in an Asian or American port. It was wild. The international shipping community desperately needed standardization. This treaty was really the first successful attempt to bring in a truly universal tonnage measurement system that people could actually trust globally.
Okay, let's dive into how they fixed this. The 1969 convention didn't just tweak the math, it completely revamped the terminology to draw a massive line in the sand. Out went the old traditional jargon of gross registered tons, which was abbreviated as lowercase GRT, and net registered tons, or lowercase NRT. And in came a totally new, simplified system. Gross tonnage, capitalized GT, and net tonnage, capitalized NT. Now, this wasn't just some clever marketing rebrand. That shift to capitalization signaled a total fundamental break from those old Morrison-era formulas. Both of these new tonnages are calculated completely independently of one another, using entirely new mathematical standards that left the old, fractured systems in the dust.
But, why does anyone actually care so much about these specific numbers? Why does tonnage matter so deeply to the shipping industry? Well, it all comes down to two things: the rules and the money. Gross tonnage forms the absolute baseline for vital maritime laws. We're talking manning regulations, meaning literally how many crew members are legally required to safely operate the vessel, as well as really strict safety rules and registration fees. And then, when it comes to the sheer cost of doing business, both gross and net tonnages are used to calculate port dues. Every single time a ship parks in a harbor, it pays, and it pays a fee based mathematically on these exact measurements. It is a huge deal.
All right, moving into Section 1, Gross versus Net Tonnage, the mechanics. Let's get into the nitty-gritty of how this actually works.
We're going to start with gross tonnage, or GT. Under the new standard, gross tonnage is defined as a function of the molded volume of all enclosed spaces of the ship. Basically, think of this as the absolute total internal footprint of the vessel. It includes the hull, the superstructure, every single hallway, every engine room, the crew cabins, the cargo holds, everything. If a space is enclosed within the permanent structure of the ship, its volume factors right into the gross tonnage. It's the comprehensive, big-picture measure of the ship's total overall size and presence in the water.
Following right on the heels of that is net tonnage, or NT. Now, while gross tonnage measures absolutely everything, net tonnage is produced by a specific formula that is a function of the molded volume of strictly the cargo spaces of the ship. This calculation very intentionally isolates the actual earning capacity of the vessel. Think about it. How much physical space is dedicated strictly to moving the goods that actually make the ship profitable? Well, that's your net tonnage. For a port authority, this number is absolutely vital because it represents the real commercial value of the ships sitting in their harbor, and that's exactly why it's used to calculate their dues.
And that brings us to a super clever rule the drafters put in place to prevent, essentially, accounting loopholes. The convention explicitly states that the net tonnage shall not be taken as less than 30% of the gross tonnage. This is so smart because historically, naval architects would sometimes design these incredibly bizarre ships with totally strange internal layouts just to exploit the math. They'd technically reduce their cargo volume on paper just to dodge taxes. By instituting a hard 30% floor for net tonnage relative to gross tonnage, the convention made sure that a massive ship could never claim, "Oh, we're essentially all engine room and crew quarters," just to drastically lower its cargo-based port dues. Pretty sneaky, right? But the convention shut that right down.
Which brings us to Section 2, the 12-year transition. You can probably imagine that completely changing the mathematical foundation of an entire global industry's fee structure literally overnight would cause absolute economic chaos. I mean, because port and other dues are charged according to ship tonnage, the drafters had to bake what they called economic safeguards directly into the convention. They drafted the rules specifically to ensure that, as much as possible anyway, the gross and net tonnages calculated under this brand new GT and NT system didn't actually differ too wildly from the numbers calculated under the old methods. Ultimately, they wanted global standardization, for sure, but they definitely did not want a sudden, massive tax hike or a catastrophic revenue drop for all the stakeholders involved. To execute these economic safeguards smoothly, they rolled out a massive, multi-step phase-in period. So, Step 1, the convention officially entered into force on July 18, 1982. Any brand new ship built on or after that specific date had to use the new rules immediately. No exceptions. However, for older ships built before that 1982 date, they were given an unprecedented 12-year grace period. They were actually allowed to retain their existing, older tonnage calculations for over a decade just to let their current economic contracts naturally play out. Finally, on July 18, 1994, the 12-year phase-in period ended. On that day, the cliff arrived, and every single merchant ship on the ocean finally had to comply with one universal system. Think about that for a second. It took 140 years from George Morsom's initial method back in 1854 to a unified treaty in 1969 to final universal compliance in 1994 just to get the entire world on the exact same page. But, that painstaking, incredibly complex diplomatic effort is exactly what gave us the streamlined, standardized maritime industry that keeps our modern global economy afloat today. It really makes you think about all the incredible logistics operating just out of sight, quietly making our modern lives possible. Which leaves us with this final question to ponder. What other invisible systems regulate our globalized world today, just waiting to be understood? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep feeding your curiosity, and I'll catch you next time.